All right, welcome to Tough Love Tuesday. Today we're talking about how you can get clarity and then ultimately get what we want when we own a business, which is our clients. Now, if you, for example, like me at some points in my career, felt a little lost, you have 1,000,001 ideas, executing on one too many ideas, and how to articulate it. Our student, Tim, talk to me a little bit about what we're getting into today.
So we're going to talk about how when you are talking to people, when you're talking to potential clients, when you're creating content, when you're putting things out into the world, how important it is for you to be clear about what it is you do, who you do it for, why you do it. And the reason for this is because you only have 3 seconds. You have 3 seconds of attention. And we know this. This is really interesting. I don't remember a while back when Facebook started providing the analytics from video play. This is obviously a few years now. But they started measuring the video play, like the length of video that you watch. They measured it in 3 seconds, 10 seconds, and 1 minute. That was it. Those were the 3 metrics. It didn't matter if your video was 1 minute and 30 seconds long or 4 hours long. 3 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 minute. If you could hook people for 3 seconds, they might give you 7 more, right? And if you could keep them for that, then they might give you up to 1 minute, right? But the idea is that you have 3 seconds. And in that 3 seconds, you have to be able to clearly communicate what it is you're bringing to the table, what the benefit is for the person listening, and what's going to happen because of it, why they should care, all that stuff. You have 3 seconds in our short attention span digital world to capture people. And that you cannot capture without clarity of what you're trying to accomplish. And so
it also speaks to, by the way, it's right on for even YouTube, for example. Like we've been talking a lot about the importance of the first 30 seconds, even on a YouTube video, for example, right?
Yeah, absolutely. People want to know, there's so much stuff out there, right? There's so much information. There's so much entertainment. There's just so many things out there that people know they can go to the next one, right? It's like when iPods finally became popular, right? It was before, if you had a Walkman, which I had a Walkman, right? You had to fast forward or rewind through a song. And so a lot of times it was a bother. So you just listen to whatever the song was on next. But then you got the iPod and you could just press play the next song. And so more and more, we just went to the thing we wanted. And now when you get on YouTube and you're looking at, you're watching this video on YouTube right now, and right over there on the sidebar, which I am not directing you towards, are 10 other videos that you could go to while you're watching this video. So if you can't be clear on what the value prop is, no one's gonna listen. So the value prop for this, which we're probably late in saying already, is that if you're not clear on what you're doing, it's not going to help you get clients. Clients are going to walk away from you because they're going to be unsure. When they're unsure, they don't spend money or time.
Absolutely. So let's go right into this and try to give as much value as we can in a short period of time. The first thing we want to go over is maybe what is the importance of brand clarity? Like we hear a lot, right? You got to niche down on your target audience. You got to find an ideal target audience, or ideal client. You need to figure out your who, what, why, all this stuff. But I don't think a lot of people explain exactly why. And so let's go over, how does getting clarity for your brand result into more clients for you, or more attention, more authority, more?
Yeah. So think about this. Think about anybody that you follow that you really, really enjoy. Why do you follow them at a social media level? Why do you trust them? Why do you go to them? They are the go-to for you for what? And if you can articulate that, then they've done a good job of clarifying what their brand is about, right? And that's what it is. Like we talked about this last week. There are 2 levels of branding. There's the level that when you're in the room with somebody, when you're on their social media page, when you're watching their YouTube video, when you're listening to their podcast, when you're reading their newsletter, you can say, this is what this person does. This is what they bring to the table. And then there's the second level of branding, when you've done that first level so well that when I am sitting alone by myself and I have a problem that you can solve, I think of you. I think of you when you're not in the room. I think of you when you're not in front of my face. I think of you as the solution to my problem. That's the second level of branding. And so when you get to that level, that's when people organically just come to you. They come to you for solutions. They come and they buy your products. They come and they buy your services. You only get to that level through clarity. Why would you come into my mind for a specific problem unless that's been the thing you've been addressing for X amount of time, right? It's clear to me that you can solve that problem in my life. It's like when you're going to go like on a road trip. Like if I was going to drive to see you right now, Raylen, this is how, and I got onto social media, and let's just say everybody out there was doing that, directions. This is how most businesses, this is how most coaches, this is how most professionals would do it. Drive south from Michigan and then turn right.
For a long time.
For a long time. But a better approach would be to use like MapQuest, GPS, right? Like these things where like MapQuest it's the next best step, right? MapQuest is the next best step because it gives you a printout. Like this is how to actually get there, right? But then there's this third level of like you can pull out your iPhone and you can just plug it in and it'll give you turn-by-turn directions. So think about that in your approach of clarity, right? Go south and then turn right and kind of go south and right for a while until you run into a lot of desert. Not super clear. Not totally sure I'm going to trust that. Probably want a little bit more. MapQuest. It exists. You get these printed out instructions, but they're passive in the sense that they're already written, right? They're not dynamic. They can't tell me if there's traffic ahead or if that road is still there, bridge. So it's a lot better. It's a lot more clear on how to get there. And then you have turn-by-turn directions, right? Which is exactly, no matter which way you turn, even if you turn off course, you're going to get to your destination. So think about which one of those things you trust more when you go on a trip. And the reason is the clarity of direction you're getting. You know you're going to get a result from that versus this. And it's the same way when you're talking about what you're doing. The more clear you can be, the more precise you can be, the more relevant you can be to the current situation, the current cultural climate, whatever, the more people are going to trust you. And then they're going to come to you.
You know what I also think about too is, has anyone ever said like, hey, you should watch this movie? And you go, hey, what is it about? And they go, oh, it's about a guy who he's like in a desert or something and he's running away. I don't know. You should definitely just watch the movie though.
I just liked it, right? That's yeah.
And like okay. how likely are you to go watch that movie, right? But if someone goes, oh my God, it's I think about everything always, everything. Oh my God, it would help if I could say
everything
always all at once, right?
Yes, yeah.
When I was recommending that movie, it's the most interesting movie I've seen in a long time. And it talks a lot about nihilism. It even talks about happiness. There's a beautiful story, a love story between a mother and a daughter. And what does that mean? And what do they go through? Like it's a little bit more clear about what it's even about, right? So you can give a recommendation. I think about that when I think about recommendations on even who to follow, right? Recommendations on even, when you get referrals from clients, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, we, just recently I had to rethink about, our client, ideal clients. I had to think about our offer. Is it clear enough? Because recently we got a referral from one of our clients. And the first question he asked me on the phone was, hey, what do you guys do? Ooh, that's a problem. Like if you get a referral, right? Like now he knew we did some form of marketing, but it wasn't all that clear. And so I think when we're thinking about brand clarity, this also goes into referrals and again, even like who to follow, et cetera. So how can we get a little bit more clear in what we do? We did recently, I don't know if you want to go over, but we recently did an activity for our coaches in the workshop that we put on that I think worked really, really well. And I think a lot of people were kind of shocked by how didn't go very well for a lot of people. So do you want to go over what we did for that one?
Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest exercises is the exercise you learned in school when you were looking at like a book report, for example, right? And you wanted to bring out the major pieces, which was who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? The questions that you ask, you should be able to look at your own brand and answer succinctly for each one of those things, right? What do you do? Why do you do it? Who do you do it for? How do you do it? Maybe the when and where, maybe not always super necessary, but it could be depending on, you might have a location specific business. So the where might be super important, right? You might,
or you put on like a workshop, for example, you do a workshop that's like only once a month, right?
Yeah, so those things can be important. We'll say that they're sides to this, but If you can't answer succinctly, and by succinctly, I mean a sentence,
Mm.
your who, of your why, of your what, of your how. If you don't have a sentence for each of those four, then you're not clear on what you do. And if you can't speak them without it sounding like a book report, you're not clear on what you do. So I challenge everybody, spend time answering these four questions. They will get you light years ahead of where you're at, even if they're not fantastic, right? Even if they're not perfect yet.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did, so we had our elevated coaches go through this activity. And so what we did was, and it's kind of a fun, you can do this either with your current, audience or even with people that you know. And so we paired two people up and they had to interview each other. So I'd interview Tim and I go, all right, so what do you do? Who do you do it for? And maybe why you do it. Tim would explain it to me. So now when we come back from those breakout groups, I would have to announce and present, if you will, Tim and his business to everyone else. And Tim can't say anything, right? I have to do all the presenting as if it's even my business. And what you find is right afterwards, we would ask the person that they were presenting for, hey, how close was that to what you actually do? And it was surprising to, I think, a lot of people that they are not very clear on what they're doing. Because if you can't articulate it very succinctly, as you were mentioning, Tim, to somebody that you're meeting with for even 20 minutes, then how in the world is someone that's going to be able to just look at your Instagram really quick or look at your YouTube, understand, hey, how is this person going to help me? And so when you get that feedback, so one of the exercises you can do on top of obviously figuring out what do you do, who do you do it for, and why you do it, go to somebody that you know, explain it to them and go, hey, explain it to me back, right? Can you articulate what is it that I'm doing? Why do I do it? And who do I do it for? And again, what you'll find is gaps, right? Like, oh, that wasn't very clear. Like, they don't understand actually what I do. They're just kind of rambling here. And so if that happens, then again, imagine that person being an evangelist or someone that's really excited about your brand, but doesn't know how to explain it to other people. You're definitely going to have some issues. Not to mention too, this leads into a little bit into the sales component of things. Like Tim, if you get on a sales call with somebody and you can't clearly articulate what you do and how you help people, well, how are you expecting them to make a decision? And they can't even differentiate you from anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things that happen there. Like, I think that's a great exercise. Like, we did that in the workshop and it was fantastic, right? Because it's one thing when you say it, it's another thing when you hear somebody else say it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happens, and people, we don't think about this, but there's one of the big reasons to keep it succinct is because, well, it does a few things for you. First of all, it causes you to pick and choose, right? It causes you to say, I do this versus that. I really want this to be the thing. So it causes you to make decisions. The shorter that it gets, the more likely it will be remembered. If someone has to remember an entire paragraph versus a sentence. So when someone walks away from a meeting with you and they go, oh crap, what did they do? Well, I have to remember their 35-minute spiel. Well, I'm not going to remember anything about that, right? But if you could be succinct, right? This is why taglines are super important in branding, because they stick in your head, right? A jingle, a tagline, those types of things get lodged in our head and we begin to know them for that thing. But then here's another piece, like the words that you use create associations with the people that you're talking to. So choosing your words wisely, because we sit in our head all day, right? So things mean one thing to me versus what they mean to something else. Like, I do a lot of strategy. When I say strategy, to some people, they don't know what that means, or they have a different idea. Like we talk about this, Raylen, branding, right? The word branding is actually kind of vague and not useful because some people have a different understanding of what branding is. And so being intentional with your words will also help them create associations and remember. So when you hear other people say it 30 minutes after you talked, they're just trying to remember the points, right? And so they're going to remember it verbatim. So they're going to draw out the associations they have in their brain with those words. And you'll start to think about how other people process the information that you gave them. And it's really powerful to think through the words that you use, the length of time it takes, what things you choose versus what things you don't choose. Now that's a little more advanced level, right? The first level is just to get it down on paper in one sentence each. the next thing is to shop it out to people, right? Have those conversations, test it out, your elevator pitch, all this kind of stuff, and get it out there, put it on your website, put it in your content. And then the third level is to refine it, really refine it. Like, is this what I want to be known for? Is this how I want to be known? Are these the things that I want associated with me?
And I think one of the things that I think we say a good amount, but if you don't do the branding work, somebody's going to do it for you. Like I remember back in the Clubhouse days, in the social audio days, at one point they only referred to me as like a sales coach.
Yeah.
And part of where like tough love comes from in the brand actually came from that. I didn't intentionally set it out to be like the tough love coach. It's just whenever somebody like was introducing me in those fields, they would say he's a really, really good sales coach. And he is really focused. He's a lot of tough love. He constantly says, I love you. And then he'll just like mad talk shit to you, but it's all like for good. It's all for the good. It's all for the better. And when I was thinking about my brand, part of that I liked, part of that I didn't, because I wasn't really a sales coach anymore. I was branching out. I was doing more just overall business coaching, getting into marketing. And so I didn't want to be associated with sales. So now you have a decision to make, which is, I don't want to be associated with that thing. This is what people are thinking of me as. And then you make a choice and you start to be intentional about it. And again, but what's most interesting about even my own journey is that I got a little bit more broad with the business coaching aspect of it. It's like the sales coaching was easier because it was so niche down, because it was one result, right? More sales. And then when I went more broad, it became more difficult to know, like, okay, within the business, if you're a business coach, right? Like that's a really big field, and you can somewhat niche down a little bit and go coaching and all that. It took us a while for me to figure this out anyway, of our kind of new thing, our new venture, which is helping coaches become thought leaders, right? Like specifically on YouTube. And this is where the where part of who, what, where it can be important.
Yep.
So like for us, for example, and one of the things that we'll talk about, and I'll put it in the description, but Tim and I are doing these 1-day intensives for coaches so they can transition over to their thought leadership to YouTube, because it's kind of difficult to get started, right? You don't know what kind of content to create. Maybe you're just confused about, even how to get started and the branding of it all, and the banners and the keywords so in 1 day we help people transition from the boring short form bullshit that they are typically used to doing and transitioning to long form over on YouTube because of how many, amazing things you could do. With that being said, though, that's where I think the where comes in. That's interesting because it's coaches. So we know the who, right? We're helping coaches become thought leaders, the what, right? And then where we do it on is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now, pretty much everything that we do. Now, thought leadership, obviously it's a little vague and we could probably maybe work on that. But I think for the most part in our field, what a thought leader is. At least you should anyway. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Thought leader, like you share your thoughts, bro.
Yeah. And sometimes it is the positioning of that. So the people who understand that word are the people that we want to work with. So sometimes you're using words intentionally to separate yourself from other people, people that you don't want to work with. But you bring up a really good point there, and this is something that's really important about branding. A lot of people forget is that you can't control your brand. You don't control your brand. The best you can do is influence it. And you're influencing it, and every time you show up somewhere, every time you put something out, you're influencing what you want people to think about you. And that's why intentionality is super important, because if you want to be associated with certain things, for us coaches, high performance coaches, YouTube, all these types of things, like we need to talk about that kind of stuff. Like if we spend our time talking about the latest TikTok trends, are people going to be like, oh yeah, I really want to get my thought leadership going on, and for YouTube, and I really want to check out these guys because they spend a lot of time on TikTok. So it's like, what are you doing? And we've talked about this before, right? When we were getting a lot of broke clients, it's because the mentality that we were speaking to a lower mentality, right? And so the things that you do, they have results. And if you're like currently right now, you could kind of assess where you're at. And this is something, sorry, this is an aside, but I'm gonna go on a tangent here for a second. We've worked with some people who, when looking at their current results, this is where we're currently at, and these are the things I'm currently doing to get where I'm currently at, we're unwilling to say that these things are not helpful, even though they're not getting me results I want. And so part of branding is being very honest with yourself, with the work that you're doing, with the things you're trying to do, right? And being able to say, these things are getting me this result, but this is the result I want. Can I be humble enough to do the things necessary to get there? What if it means abandoning this, it means tweaking this, it means whatever. But the things that you do create that brand for you, and the things that people associate you with and think about you. So that's why everything becomes really important at that level.
Yeah, and then like I like how you said you can't necessarily control how people view your brand at all times, but you can be more intentional about the inputs of it, right?
Yeah.
And again, this for me goes back to this transition. It's going to take a minute, I think, for our brand to catch up with it and all those things. But that's why the transition for me came from doing mostly short form content for our clients to doing long form, because it just felt like it didn't matter. It didn't make sense for our brand, because it's interesting, because I think, you know, our brand and elevated in what we do for coaches, we're a little bit deeper than most, right? Like, we're not trying to be surface level players in the game, right? And be like everybody else. And since the beginning, we've always talked crap about the dancing reels and all that stuff. And so the transition makes sense for us. So let me ask you a question though. One final question on brand clarity is, just for clarity's sake, if we're unsure about our brand, number one, how can we know that we're unsure about our brand? Like, how do you know when you're like, actually, I thought I was clear. I thought my offer was clear. I thought my ideal target was clear, and it's not? Like, how do we know when we have some work to do?
Yeah. So symptoms, right? Do an audit. Like we just talked about. Am I getting clients? Am I getting traffic? Am I getting engagement? Am I getting responses to my invitations, essentially? If the answer is no, then okay, why? Is it because the content isn't good, the offer isn't clear? Like, we start to go through it. Another way you can do it is if you struggle, articulate it, right? I struggle to tell the person next to me what I do in less than 30 seconds. If it takes you 4 minutes to tell somebody what you do not have clarity. And then I'd say another third kind of symptom, especially for content creators, is like sitting down and saying, what am I going to make content about? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to post about. I don't know what to talk about. That shows that you don't have clarity either. Because when you have clarity, it takes away kind of that guesswork and it gives you a focus. I always call it clarity, like the focus and the filter, right? The filter where all the ideas and options and opportunities that are coming in, you can filter them based on what you're trying to do. And then you can focus on the things that are important to you.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And people don't talk enough about the brand being a filter. Like, there's so many things you could be doing, right? And there's nothing that you should be doing. Meaning, you know, if there's a new app, like there's a new app called Clapper that people are talking about, you don't have to be on that fucking app. Right. Like, you don't have to. Like, you could choose not to do it, and you're not going to admit, like, we have this FOMO thing. Or if you have an idea, like, one of the biggest, I think my work as a coach for one of our clients in particular, and he knows it's Jesse. My work is going, no, we're not doing that right now. Yeah. And because he has brilliant ideas, and I'm like, we haven't executed on the first idea. So no, we're not doing that. That's a branding thing, though, and I didn't realize that until I met you. So anyway, I do want to wrap up. It's been about 30 minutes. Again, just for clarity's sake, if you're trying to figure out your how you can be more clear about your brand, simply answer these questions. What do you do? Who do you do it for? And maybe even why do you do it? Like, if you can answer those 3 questions in a sentence only, then you're probably on the right path. If you can't, get some help. Hit up my boy Tim. Hit us up so we can kind of help you get more clear. And once again, if you are one of those people that are watching this right now going, man, these 2 idiots are talking on live on YouTube, I could do a better job. Let us help you do that, right? We'll transition you from the short form nonsense that you've been doing for a while, creating the stuff that you know doesn't really matter. You throw it into the abyss. Less than 24 hours later, nobody's viewing it. Doesn't result in the business for you. Let's create shit that matters over on YouTube. We'll help you actually set that up, your branding, your banner, your content strategy, and we'll edit, produce, and schedule and launch one video for you all in one day, which is pretty amazing. So check the description to find out how to apply to that. Tim, any final thoughts before we jump out of here?
No, just remember, clarity changes everything about what you do. If you're not clear on what you do, then it doesn't matter what you do, right? Because you won't get results anyway. So spend the time up front so you don't have to spend it later fixing all the crap.
Beautiful. Tim, thank you as always, Mr. Brand Baron.